This is the 20th meeting Janet Asner has directed, the 20th meeting. She can recall the specifics of every one. Much to my chagrin, she reminded me the other day about a letter of complaint I wrote in 1977. When the ASA spelt my name wrong. (1984), that Orwellian year, was the first meeting she directed. Jim Short was the president, the place was San Antonio, Texas, the theme was the social fabric. In an Orwellian premonition, Jim Short's theme statement specifically called attention to the social fabric's vulnerability to terrorism. Who said ASA presidents are not prophets? Conventions need organizers, but they cannot exist without registrants and participants. And the ASA is a high participant organization. In 1984, there were 2,543 registrants. Today, their number has doubled to over 5,427. We have broken all records by a large margin. We have never had more than 5,000 before. In 1984, there were 1,580 participants. Today, their number has tripled to 4,625, another record. Every year, the program becomes more complex. We are now up to 570 sessions, and every year, Janet Asner rises to the occasion. Every crisis becomes her challenge. I cannot begin to tell you the enormity of her contribution to sociology. And this year, particularly, I had no idea what troubles I had set in motion with our ambitious program. But she bore those burdens with magisterial calmness, that wonderful, ironic smile that I never can comprehend, and her boundless, boundless tolerance. So thank you, Janet, for all those 20 years. And I think you deserve a second round of applause. Cast your mind back to 1984. Who was the President of the United States? That's good, good. We sociologists do know some things. Yes, California's very own Ronald Reagan. There's been a lot of talk about Ronald Reagan these last few months. He didn't like sociology nor sociologists, especially the public variety. When governor of this state, he fired Clark Kerr, sociologist Monkey, from the position of president of the University of California for being too lenient on protesting students. Many of them, you can be sure, were sociologists. Governor Reagan's bête noire was civil rights leader and sociologist of sport, Harry Edwards. But I thought you might be interested in one particular news report from 1966. Referring to the Delano farm workers' strike, a very famous strike that year, Governor Reagan said, "I don't believe the agitating groups are based on an honest desire to better the conditions of farm workers. They have," he said, "a sociological axe to grind." He knew what he was talking about. He was, after all, a sociologist himself. And that's an official secret steadfastly maintained by both sociologists and Reagan supporters alike. Today we find ourselves with another governor from Hollywood with his own anti-sociological axe to grind. Indeed, no sooner was he in office than he swung his axe against the University of California's Institute for Labor and Employment. Dominated by sociologists, the ILE, as it's called, had developed a mutual collaboration with the California labor movement, including, I might add, with Unite Here, the union that represents our hotel workers whose contract expired last night. Terminate the ILE though he tried, the Terminator was defeated. For all the similarities, Sacramento is not a Hollywood film. 2 weeks ago, after a long and courageous struggle led by ILE's redoubtable sociologist Ruth Miltman, Governor Schwarzenegger signed off on a budget that included the funds for the ILE. This was indeed a major victory for labor and for public sociology, not the first nor the last. As you see, one axe begets another. I too have an axe to grind. It is, as some of you may know, the axe of public sociology. I stand before you to sharpen that axe. For 30 years, I have watched the sad denouement of my own researchers. Between 1968 and 1972, I studied the copper mines of Zambia, only to see the price of copper subsequently plummet and Zambian society with it. Structural adjustment brought desperate poverty and decline. Between 1974 and 1975, I worked as a machine operator in South Chicago, only to be followed by the almost continuous demise of manufacturing industry and its trade unions. Today, 30 years later, South Chicago is an industrial wasteland. Between 1986 and 1989, I worked as a furnaceman in Hungary's largest steel mill, the Lenin Steelworks. I love to say that, the Lenin Steelworks. I worked in the October Revolution Socialist Brigade. I worked there only to see the market transition decimate a proud labor aristocracy. Hungary was quickly catching up with South Chicago. In the first half of 1991, I worked in Soviet rubber and furniture factories, and then, during the next 5 months, after I had left, the Soviet Union dissolved under its own unbearable metallic weight. Or was it the way I drilled those holes? For over a decade now, I have followed the social fallout of an unprecedented economic collapse, what Marxists might call primitive disaccumulation, accompanied by unimaginable disparities of wealth, a tragic revenge on its more or less egalitarian past. Disaster and decline followed me wherever I went. And then I became the president of the ASA. And they said it was the end of sociology. So far, at any rate, sociology shows no signs of disaster or decline. Indeed, it has never been stronger. Membership is climbing to what it was in the halcyon days of the 1970s. Undergraduate enrollments have outstripped economics and fast catching up with political science. I could give you the facts and figures about the resilience and vitality of sociology against those prophets of doom, but such self-congratulation would be misplaced. Sociology may be in good shape, but the world around us is in bad shape. The world needs sociology. It needs public sociology. During the last 2 years, therefore, I have come home and turned the ethnographic eye inward on our own profession in order to see how knowledge can be turned outwards. If before I studied the world to change sociology, now I study sociology to change the world. This back translation of sociology, that is taking sociology back to the people it came from, this is the project of public sociology. As Pierre Bourdieu, perhaps the most renowned public sociologist of the late 20th century, and in this one matter he did agree with his brother Michel Foucault, has warned that this back translation from sociology to publics is delicate, is difficult, and it's dangerous. Nothing worth doing is not dangerous. Between academic theory and folk theory, there is an almost unbridgeable hiatus, but bridge it we must. To put it simply, if conventionally we have been in the business of understanding or explaining the world, indeed, as so many people have said in the last 2 or 3 days and will not presumably not stop